good on my list of potential candidates that I would vote for so far. And I'm not going to kill him just on this one. But why come out with the big lie? He comes out and says, Mark Rubio says the United States is not modernizing its nuclear weapons. That's what he said. And they've got video here. You can look on PolitiFact. He said that he was speaking at the Iowa Faith and Freedom Summit. Guess what kind of people he's talking to, okay? Think about it. I'm going to give you a clue. Faith. Freedom. Remember that thing Obama took from everybody? Yeah, because you're all in prisons now, right? And I'm sure they came and got all your guns and put you in the FEMA camps, right? No? That's amazing. Man, so many people were wrong. Rubio said that threats worldwide require strong American leadership, which we cannot exert as long as we eviscerate. Don't fucking use 4-syllable words with me or I will send the midgets, Marco. Eviscerate military spending, which is what we are doing now. We are placing our nation at a dangerous position. Well, that's what he said. And I'm saying this quoting, so it's going to be a sick in there. We are placing our nation at a dangerous position. I think he means in. What we have here is a prepositional problem. Then he said this about the country's nuclear stockpiles. We are the only nation that is not modernizing its nuclear weapons, unquote. All right, folks. Back in about 2002-ish, when I was back in college for the second time, I took a course specifically on nuclear weapon proliferation worldwide and the whole deal. And there is never a time when your top military weapons, the ones that keep you in at least a viable position, if not a powerful position in the world, are not undergoing upgrading of some sort. All right. Can you imagine if we had just, let's say, kept our P-51s, our ponies from World War II, and not fucked with them, just kept them cleaned and polished, and then used those in Vietnam when the MiGs came out? You're upgrading. If you're not upgrading, you're losing. All right, you may know that one of the biggest nuclear weapons ever detonated, the biggest one that we know of, was detonated by the Soviet Union. Sometime like in, I don't remember exactly when, we detonated our first one in 44, I think, or very early 45, and then dropped it in like May or June of 45. And then the Soviet Union did one in like 1951, I think. That was bigger than any nuclear weapon we'd ever tested. And it was, it's recorded. So this is an arms race. This is where it begins. The popular and powerful countries want the very best weapons. And let me just add a little side note in here. There may be something going on with UFOs that has to do with our own technology. In other words, I offer credence to the possibility that UFOs are nothing extraterrestrial, even though I know deep in my heart there's plenty of extraterrestrial life out there. I'm not so sure they give a fuck about us or that they need ships to come visit us to know about us. I'm sure they have other ways if they're advanced. So, but then again, you got to look at the ones that are caught in the middle. They're somewhere near us in technology, so they are sending out physical units to do surveillance and whatnot. So think about this for a second. You see something flying through the sky. It is moving at 10 times the speed of sound. Not possible by today's human standards. And it does that from a position of 0 miles per hour up to that speed. Okay, that'll kill anyone inside. Any living bioorganism can't handle those G-forces unless gravity's been manipulated somehow. So maybe we did come up with something that's pretty fucking fast. And maybe we are being highly secretive about it. Wouldn't you be? Let's show the world we've got something that moves 6 times speed of sound. First thing we ought to do is tell the Russians about it. Chinese. Yeah, so that would be kept secret. I'm not saying that's what's going on. It's not even a suspicion I have. I have no evidence for that. It's just a possibility. So let's get back to it. He says we're not upgrading. So I think his premise here is we're going to get rid of our nuclear weapons. And since that's the plan, we're not spending money on upgrading. Don't buy it. Anyway, he said, we wanted to know, this is what PolitiFact says, we wanted to know whether Rubio was correct that the U.S. isn't modernizing its nuclear weapons. So we consulted with experts on U.S. nuclear policy. We reached out to Rubio's presidential campaign and Senate office and did not get a response. Let me tell you something right now, Marco Rubio and the rest of you candidates out there. This is not the time to dodge questions. All right, once you have one, maybe your primary, then you can start dodging questions. But you need to be available right now because every question you hide from is going to be a mark of guilt on you, even if you're not guilty. Answer the fucking questions. Or as they said in Braveheart, answer the fucking question. Yeah, that's what Stephen said. God told him to tell William Wallace. I don't know if that really happened. I'm just writing the book. Multiple experts told us that Rubio's claim about nuclear weapons is wrong because ongoing and planned nuclear modernization efforts are extensive. The United States has been spending billions modernizing nuclear equipment and has plans to continue to do so. The National Nuclear Security Administration March 2015 report to Congress details plans to modernize nuclear equipment, including various warheads, over the coming years. A Congressional Research Service report issued the same month covered similar topics. In other words, nobody's denying the fact that we are modernizing our nuclear weapons, at least the ones we're going to keep in service. Why he would say this, I don't know. I often want to ask these candidates, look, I'm fucking nobody. You're running for president. If I can go find the facts, why can't you? And if I can go find the facts and you can't, shouldn't that be alarming to those of us in the voting contingent? Don't you think? You can't find some basic facts and you get it exactly wrong? That's terrifying in a world with the internet and reliable sources. Modernization is happening for many different types of nuclear programs, said Matthew Bunn, an expert on nuclear proliferation, professor at Harvard University. During the 90s, Bunn was advisor to the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy. He said, first, while we haven't deployed major new strategic systems in some time, we've been modernizing the ones we've got more or less continuously. New rocket motors and guidance systems for the Minuteman missiles, lots of rebuilt parts for the B-52s, et cetera, et cetera. We're in the middle of a $10 billion modernization of the B-61 bomb, Bunn said. $10 billion, folks. And we're not spending anything on nuclear weapon modernization? Come on. What are you talking about, Marco? You got to check your facts, brother. So the size of the U.S. stockpile has been declining since the 1960s and will decline further under the new START treaty agreed with Russia in 2011. But nuclear weapons can live for a long time. Several nuclear weapons introduced or upgraded in the 1990s or 2000s can be used for another 20, 30 years, says Hans Christensen, director of Nuclear Information Project at the Federation of American Scientists. Christensen pointed out several upgrades in recent decades. Rubio compared the United States to the rest of the world without naming any other countries when he said, we are the only nation that is not modernizing its nuclear weapons. What a crazy thing to say and be exactly wrong about. Why? Why would you do that? Anyway, so who said this? Bunn said, so I would say, A, not true that we haven't been modernizing at all, because we have been. B, is mostly true that we haven't bought any big new strategic delivery systems lately, and it's highly misleading. C, not to mention that all nuclear powers other than ourselves and Russia have tiny nuclear arsenals compared to ours. And it's true. I mean, Russia, yeah, they compete. China's probably going to start getting up there soon. But, you know, as an example, as I've said before on this show, the United States Navy, at least as of 2011 or 2012, was bigger than the next most 13 powerful navies combined. Think about that. There's your number one Navy in the world. Now take numbers 2 through 14. Add them all up. They're still not as big as number one. We're spending too much on defense, folks. Trust me, we are. And you know it comes from contractors. That's where we're bleeding. Nobody will tell you, but I'll tell you, it's contractors. That's where we're bleeding. Because once they get the contract and they start getting it renewed every year, they will kill to keep that contract getting fulfilled every year and granted. So spending cuts become an issue, major issue. People be getting paid. Human nature comes in. People want money. People want power. People do favors. It's a shame, isn't it? But like I saw in a terrible, terrible movie the other day that was some sort of attempt to mock Seven, the movie. Are we really evil? I mean, aren't we just whatever our nature is? And if we are just what our nature is, and society somehow, through some means, has come up with this sort of a best possible scenario situation to label us. Have you noticed that? The very best that humans can be, that's how we're expected to be. Why is that? That's not natural. No other species does that to themselves. They let themselves be who they are. We don't. We tell ourselves to ignore most of the baser instincts. We have to. It's illegal not to. You cannot just do what you want to do. Have you noticed that? So I wonder where we're going with that. Do we just want to keep our prisons full? I think we need to rethink law from a philosophy standpoint and from a purely genetic biological standpoint of human behavior, personally. and start saying, as long as we're going to take natural behaviors and make them illegal, we're going to have full prisons. So we need to figure out what it is. Now, once you do something that is a crime that has negatively affected somebody else and they can prove it, I get it. You should go to jail for that. But half the shit people are in jail for today is not something that hurts someone else. You know, it was just them being in defiance of a law or a code, or otherwise doing something to themselves that the law does not allow them to do. What a crazy thing, man. That's not freedom. That's really not. I'm not here, politicking for anarchy or anything, and I'm not a nihilist, but, there's some points. Like, we are who we are. And what a shame that we take the bad parts of ourselves and consider those impure and in need of reform. When really, if we'd have been born 10,000 years ago, or even born today with no code in place, we would just be who we were, wouldn't we? And we might run into some trouble if we started taking liberties with people, because they're going to fight back. And that lesson was taught in that way. Well, the law has taken that away from the offended, retaliating against the offender, and put it into a position of government control so that the offended doesn't have to ever become the defendant if the aversion approach works in law. So anyway, that's getting a little too deep. And instead of getting too deep, what I'd like to do for you, because I want you to appreciate this show for the greatness that it is and has, is I think we need to get into this NHL stuff. Brandon Pruss, not a guy I know a lot about. He's a fourth liner for the Montreal Canadiens, which they call the Habs, for the old habitants or whatever, which means to live here. And it's one of those things you have to know the team really well, and I don't, so I'm not getting into it. But anyway, I think they call them habillés or habillons, or I think habitant is where I live. But anyway, it means where they live. So, the French Canadians, Montreal, they actually wanted to secede. They're like the Texas of Canada. There you have it. Prust apologizes. But before Prust apologized, Prust had to offend. So here's Brandon Prust. Now, for the first time in a very, very, very long time, I get to hear a player in the NHL come out on TV with reporters, and he's pissed off that he has essentially been stalked by an official for the whole game. Official fucking with him the whole game. Tell me if you believe what...
There just wasn't enough effort. It doesn't matter about shots at this point. It doesn't matter about X's and O's and what we need to do systematically. We need to just put our head down and bear down and go out there and work. And the work ethic isn't there.
And given that, how do you change that, especially in the middle of the season? How do you change that mindset, I guess?
Take a long, hard look in the mirror as an individual and as a team. Try and find a way to correct it. It should be the easiest thing to correct. I mean, really, it's not a systematic thing. It's not a teaching thing. It's not something that you need to learn. We're all in the NHL here. We should be here because of hard work and because of, effort and second efforts and third efforts. So we know how to do it. We just got to go out and do it. And it's just embarrassing that we choose not to. I don't know why. And when, I can see it's just the way it goes when you have an 82-game season and you're on a 5-6 game winning streak and you have a bad game, you have a letdown game where you just don't have the energy or you don't play your best. But when you have a 4-game losing streak, you got to have the energy. You got to find the energy. You got to find the effort. And I don't understand why it wasn't there. And it's flat out embarrassing for us, for our fans, for the organization. And, thank God for Bob. Could have been 10-1 before we even had an opportunity to come back in the third.
Is that something like still early in the season? Critical time now.
All right, that clip didn't have exactly what I wanted it to have. Brandon Prust basically said that ref, and I'm going to paraphrase here, was stalking me all night. When I went to the penalty box, and Brandon Prust always goes to the penalty box, he's one of those guys, he came over and was mocking me, telling me he was going to chase me out of the building that night. Okay, refs can get personal biases against NHL players. It happens. And it can happen for a lot of reasons. It could be just because you complained about a call. It could be because you actually made a bad call as an official that people are now hounding you about that cost a team a game, and the player brings that up, something like that. It could be that the player did something dirty or perceived dirty